What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. I've been following Kevin Durant this season as he climbs the all-time scoring list. Earlier this season, of course, he passed the iconic Allen Iverson. Not too long ago, he passed Ray Allen. And I just looked and saw that he is, I think, 42 points shy of tying Patrick Ewing, who scored 24,815 points in a 17-year career. 15 of those seasons he played for the New York Knicks. Most people have him as the greatest Knick of all time. Either they have him number one or they have him number two behind Willis Reed. Generally speaking, I have him as the greatest Knick. Um, Patrick Ewing is a great player who unfortunately ran into a buzzsaw named Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls. But you can say that for a lot of different players. You could say that for Stockton and Malone. You can say it for Charles Barkley. You can say it for Reggie Miller. You know, you can say that for Penny Hardaway. Uh, Not necessarily Shaq because Shaq ultimately did win a title. But then again, maybe you could say that, in '96, who knows what could have happened if they had beaten the Bulls and played the Sonics. Maybe I don't know. Matter of fact, bringing them up, Sean Kemp for that matter. But as great as Patrick Ewing was, right? A lot of people have knocks on him. They consider him the lesser of the four giants at the center position in the '90s. Most people would rank Olajuwon number one, then followed by Shaq, then David Robinson, and then Patrick Ewing. So you could make a great argument that from 1987-ish, maybe 87 to 92, 93, you can make the argument that even into 94, you can make the argument that Patrick Ewing was the best center in the NBA because Shaq hadn't accomplished much when he first came in the first couple of years. Yeah, he was dominant, but he was raw. But he hadn't accomplished anything as far as a resume yet. Dave Robinson was putting up great numbers. The Spurs were winning, but they hadn't done anything yet. Like get to a finals, whatever, or make a serious, true playoff run. That didn't come until like what 94, 95. And Olajuwon, although earlier he did go to the finals in '86, Olajuwon you could argue was stagnating under Don Chaney in the early '90s, and the Rockets had a lot of disappointing playoff uh, exits, losing to teams in the first round that they should have been beating, or not making the playoffs at all. At least Patrick Ewing was developing as according to plan. He was a dominant player on a terrible team for many years, right? But he was a force. And one thing you have to say about Patrick Ewing is that a lot of his prime was wasted. You know, 87, 92, or so, 91, it was just wasted. And he was unlucky in a lot of ways. He's drafted in '85, the first draft lottery. Many people think that was rigged. Then, the the dream of many Knicks fans coming into '85, the possibility that they could team this great Georgetown center, they could just snag him, Patrick Ewing with uh, Bernard King, and that would be like just a dream matchup. I mean, excuse me, a dream team and team matchup, and who knows? You add little pieces here or there, that could be a championship team. But those dreams get dashed when Bernard King's knee gets smashed playing against the I think it was the Sacramento Kings when he suffered that injury. It derailed his career for quite some time. Many people thought his career was over. So then the first couple of years of his career, Patrick Ewing is a great player, putting up great individual numbers, but his team sucks. Hubie Brown, a great coaching mind, was the coach, but without any talent, doesn't matter how great you are, you're going to suck. He gets fired. They have a couple of bad coaches. Then they have Rick Pitino, the fiery Rick Pitino. And they had some success, but Rick Pitino is Rick Pitino. He's not easy to get along with. Ultimately, you know how Rick Pitino is. He burns out, and he was gone. Now they acquired Mark Jackson, popular player. They had some success. One of those years they won 50 games. But then, of course, Mark Jackson was, I believe, he was traded. It was one of the most unpopular moves in Knicks history. The Knicks kind of fall off a little bit for a while, and then they get Pat Riley, and things begin to look up. Man, Pat Riley puts a team around Patrick Ewing that's very successful. That was made for him to win, an enforcer type team. They already had Charles Oakley there. They bring in Xavier McDaniel for he wanted a defensive, tough, rugged team. I think he took a blueprint from the Pistons and expanded upon that. He also liked hard working guys. You know what I'm saying? Saw the development of John Starks. Saw Derek Harper on the team. They were a really, really good team, man. And in '92, when they had Gerald Wilkins, that might have been the best defensive team that I've seen in recent memory altogether, especially on the perimeter. That might have been one of the best defensive teams. And a lot of people will tell you that the NBA rigged that game seven, for the Bulls to win. Now, I know it was a blowout victory by the Bulls, but you've had to watch that series know what I'm talking about. I'm not complaining. I'm a Bulls fan, but, it is what it is. The next year, the Bulls fall off a little bit. They go from 67 wins to 57 wins. The Knicks go from 51 wins to 60 wins. They tied the franchise record for most wins in the season. And, a lot of people thought it was the Knicks' time. And the Knicks actually took a 2-0 lead in that Eastern Conference Finals. But Michael Jordan and the Bulls will not be denied. It was a team effort in Game 3. Jordan had that monster Game 4. And then afterwards, the Bulls just took care of business in Game 5 and Game 6. I think it was Game 5. The Knicks had not lost a game at Madison Square Garden in months. Hadn't lost any games at home the entire playoffs. And then, of course, the Charles Smith moment happened. You know, then the next year, Michael Jordan's gone. So if you're a Knicks fan, you're like, this is our year. Okay? There's no, look, Jordan's gone. And then all of a sudden, here comes this motherfucker named Reggie Miller. This new pest. This new annoyance. All right? And then you're looking over your shoulder and you see Shaq and Orlando starting to breathe on your shoulder. But you still think this is our year. Now you get past a Bulls team that you should have dispatched with earlier, logic states, but you beat them in 7. And then ultimately you get past the Pacers and you win the East. You go to the finals. If you remember that finals, how it went, man, it was more like, look, the Rockets won, but it was more like the Knicks lost that series, man. Ewan only shot 30, what, 30, what did he shoot? 36% from the floor in that series. Stark shot like 38% from the floor in that series. But despite that, it still went 7 games. And unfortunately, Starks picked the wrong fucking game to have the worst game of his career. He picked the worst game of his career to have the worst game of his career. 2 for 18, 0 for 11. And then afterwards, man, it's like the air kind of got deflated out of the Knicks fans, man, because that was their best opportunity. That was their best opportunity because the next year, the Knicks were still good, but other teams were catching up in the East. Orlando, they had caught up. Um, the Pacers, they were right there. Michael Jordan comes back. This traumatized Knicks fans like, oh boy. And then of course that series with Indiana, the game that Reggie Miller stole, the 8 in 9 seconds. And then by that time, Ewing's wrapped up like a mummy. He's so fucking banged up. The other situation, Ewing would have dunked the basketball, but he was so fucked up that he missed that layup in Game 7, and that's when Pat Riley said, "Fuck it, I'm deuces. I'm not gonna win with this team." He goes to Miami. They have a down year by their standards, but then the next year, 96, 97, after a year with Don Nelson, here comes Van Gundy, who took over for Don Nelson. They make a couple trades. They got Larry Johnson, saying they had traded him basically for Anthony Mason. They acquired Allen Houston. They acquired some other guys. Um, Now all of a sudden they're really good again. They win 57 games. It wasn't for injuries down the stretch, the Knicks would have probably have won 61 games or more, which would have been a record, well, a franchise record. Then of course in the semis, man, the Knicks are up 3-1 against Miami, a team that they always owned in the playoffs in the late 90s until 2000. Then this brouhaha, this melee occurs, which unfairly affected the Knicks over the Heat. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some Heat players that were suspended and didn't play in certain games, but it really affected the Knicks worse. So much so, it just had an effect on the series that afterwards, the NBA changed their rules so that when you were punished and sentenced and suspended for games in the playoffs, the suspensions will be held during the regular season because they didn't want these suspensions to influence the playoff series. That one did. And the Miami Heat came back from a 3-1 deficit to win that series in 7. Now, my memory serves me correctly, Ewing had a monster Game 7 because he missed Game 6, which they probably would have sealed the deal had things gone as planned. Ewing had like 38 points, 17 rebounds. He tried to do everything he could, man. But I think if I remember correctly in that game, there was no John Starks. There was no Allen Houston. I think another player was out. Was it Larry Johnson, I think, too? They had a lot of guys out, man. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't fair. Then afterwards, Ewing falls apart further. Then he has that horrible injury. I think it was in December of 97, where essentially his wrist was detached from his arm. The doctor said that the type of injury that he suffered, they normally see more in car accidents. And after that, he was never. I mean, he was deteriorating anyway, but he was never the same player after that. And then, of course, you have the 1999 season when Ewing suffers that partially ruptured Achilles, and he was effectively done for the playoffs. But you got to wonder something. Now, I do think them not having Ewing for most of the playoffs because it made them more of a speedier team. But you do got to wonder in that finals against San Antonio, with Tim Duncan dominating because of the lack of size the Knicks had. They had Marcus Camby, but that's about it. Do wonder the closeness of the games, even though they lost 4-1, most of those games were very close. You do wonder if Patrick Ewing up there could it have been enough to change the series? I don't know, but at the end of the day, Patrick Ewing was just unlucky, man. And afterward, I think the next year after 2000, he traded, and that's when he was a shell of a shell of a shell of himself. Um, but yeah, man, Patrick Ewing, all time great. But you just have to wonder, man, what could have happened if he had had a great team around him sooner? You know, what if he was teamed up with I don't know. What if he was teamed up with, say, a guy like Isaiah Thomas or something? What if I'm being way out here saying this one, but what if he was able to play with a drug free and clean Michael Ray Richardson or something like that? You know, what if he was able to play with another great player and you put them, a good team that fit around them, earlier, like in the late 80s? You know, guys like Patrick Ewing, guys like Charles Barkley had a lot of their best years wasted playing on mediocre or bad teams. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.